and welcome to those of you that might be not in the morning. I know we have people other than UK members joining us for this morning's UK Town Hall meeting of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. You are all very welcome. I'm Annette Spencer. I'm the Director of Public Affairs and Research at the IFoA. But this morning, my job is to put your questions to the panel. I'm going to introduce the panel in a moment, but I first wanted to just say a couple of words about the format for this session. So we're going to run this as a straight question and answer session. And the idea is for us to try and get through as many questions as we can to try and answer the things that are important to all of you. I've been provided with some questions that some of you have been kind enough to send us in advance, and I'm going to start off in a moment with some of those questions. But we are really keen also to get your real-time questions, and we're going to use the Q&A function, which you should be able to see as you're looking at your BlueJeans screen. We're going to use that function as the way for you to send your questions through to us. That Q&A function is live as of now. So you can start sending me questions whenever you want, and I can see those, and we'll look forward to seeing those questions coming through, and we'll try and work through as many as we can in the time that we have. So I have been thinking about what the correct collective noun would be for a group of presidential team members and a chief executive. I have come to the conclusion that it can only be a wisdom. So this morning's wise men and women, let me introduce them briefly. We have our current president, Chieh. We have the president-elect, Louise Pryor, the immediate past president, John Taylor, and the IFoA's chief executive, Stephen Mann. Right, so I think without taking up any more time on for formalities and introductions, Chieh, if you're ready, I'm going to start with the first question. So you've talked at your presidential address back in the summer, and indeed many times since, about how the actuarial profession needs to adapt and change for the future. So in your view, what is the future of the profession?
Thank you, Annette. Good morning or good afternoon to all the attendees. I'm really excited, along with my presidential colleagues and Stephen, to be engaging you, the UK audience, but I also know some people from other countries, maybe 10 to 20 countries are dialing in, especially in a year like this, where there's no opportunity to engage you face-to-face or in person. So, Annette, I can't say for certain what the future will bring because, as we all know, it is uncertain. But the vision and the strategy of IFoA is to make sure that we are influential, relevant, and impactful in our workplace, in a workplace, which I call the Do Well strategy, and also in an area of public interest, that we are a force for good, for change, for sustainability, in a world where uncertainties are very deep-seated and creating a lot of fault lines in our society. And I think that our strategy calls for us to be relevant, not just in our workplace, but also in the society at large. So that is the future. And I see that as an opportunity for the profession and for IFoA to really respond to the needs of our time. And if we can do that well, and that is contingent on us doing it well, I see a very prosperous and rewarding future for the profession and IFoA.
Annette, you're on mute.
Thank you, Louise. I was just thanking Chieh for his brevity, which I've then counterpointed by staying on mute. So someone had to do it. It's probably best it was me. Louise, I was going to turn to you next. So that's great. Thank you. We have had lots and lots of questions about all different things to do with COVID-19. So I wondered maybe if we could start with you telling us a bit about how the IFoA COVID-19 Action Task Force, or ICAT, as I think we more commonly call it, how it came about, and also maybe a bit about what outcomes have come out from the group so far and how that work is going.
Yes, thank you, Annette. I'm glad you reminded me what it stands for, because I always just think of it as ICAT and then have to struggle to remember what the initials actually stand for. It's great to know that so many people are here today, and ICAT has been another way in which many people have got involved. We've got over 550 volunteers in ICAT now, which is great. It all started off because we had some practice boards for putting together sort of COVID related working parties. We thought that it would be a good idea to have a IFoA-wide sort of coordination thing on this, and that in fact there were many aspects that weren't necessarily within the purview of a single practice board, and there needed to be some cross-practice coordination. At the same time, there was also an unofficial group of actuaries, the Actuaries COVID Response Group, ARG as it's known, which was doing fantastic work on, if you like, immediate reactions. But we felt that the IFoA needed to do something a bit longer term. So what we did was we put together this task force with the idea of doing sort of not immediate sort of 1 week responses, but slightly longer term things. We also saw it as a huge opportunity to try out new ways of working. Sometimes our existing processes feel a bit clunky, and we wanted to see if we could get something sort of faster and more reactive. So we now have about up to 93 work streams. Some of them aren't active at the moment. We've got, as I say, over 580 volunteers, actually, my thing says, from 49 countries, which is fantastic. We've had, this dates from about 2 or 3 weeks ago, so it's going to be more now, and over 76 outputs, including 52 blogs from 27 work streams. There's more in the pipeline. There's stuff coming through all the time, and we're also trying to encourage people to have to think of new ways, if you like, of spreading the information that the work streams are coming up with. So we're using blogs a lot. We've got some are doing webinars. We've got a couple of interactive websites, all sorts of different experiments going on, which is great. I know I'm taking a long time. I just want to mention one other thing, which is we have got a work stream now which is assisting the government's Scientific Advisory Group of Experts, or SAGE, in the UK. That's obviously less public because it's you know, it's working with the committee rather than with the advisory group, rather than trying to publish its results. But so we are also contributing to the UK effort in that way.
I'm just checking that I'm not still on mute. Thank you, Louise. I think it is a really good cant around the huge amount of activity that our members have been involved in on this and the different groups. So thank you for that great kind of summary. John, I'm going to turn to you next, if I may, and we're flitting around quite a few questions, different subjects to begin with, just I think to kind of give people a flavour of the breadth of things that we'll be able to answer. So I want to talk to you about exams. So I mean, obviously back in the spring, in a really rapid amount of time, we switched from our kind of conventional sort of in-person classroom exams to moving everything online for April, and we've continued with that for the September session of exams. I wondered if you could give people a sense of how successful we think the online exams have been, and also whether or not we will be reverting back to in-person exams once the pandemic situation is over.
Thanks, Annette. Very happy to talk about that, and maybe add a few comments about education more widely, simply because it's been a tremendously busy agenda for IFoA this year, some of which will have been highly visible to members in terms of exams, and some of which is kind of work in progress. And you rightly point out, Annette, the kind of rapid response from IFoA back in March, when the world was being turned on its head, to move from the conventional exams to online exams. And I think I'd first of all like to just pay tribute to the IFoA executive team. I mean, sometimes professional bodies, including the IFoA, have a bit of a reputation for being sleepy and slow to change, but the agility the organisation has shown this year has been utterly exceptional. I think many of the commercial organisations I've worked with would give their eye teeth to demonstrate such responsiveness. So it's a great tribute to the team at IFoA. Now, if I just try and quickly tell the story, so you're right in it. We very quickly moved in a small number of weeks offline format exams into online exams back in April for the majority, but not all of our exams, and tried to operate them in a way that would allow people who'd been learning for many months to sit the exams and get the benefit from their studying. But we were also mindful that it was a difficult time for learners. They were suffering from the effects of maybe the pandemic itself, the restrictions, workload, and so on. So we were quite keen to offer some latitude, like refunds if people didn't feel able to do it. So in some ways, the April sitting was a learning experience for IFoA and members in itself, but overall I think it was a very positive experience that enabled us to take the learning on board through to September. We were able to run a whole suite of exams this time in September, and we were able to craft the questions in a way that were more appropriate for an online exam, so less difficult mathematical notation, for example, to write down in an online format. And so we ended up running tens of thousands of sittings very successfully, that I think have done a really good job at upholding the high educational standards that we and our stakeholders expect of the IFoA, and have delivered, I think, a very good experience to members and learners out there. And so, emboldened by that, I think our expectation very much is that in future that will become the default way of running exams within IFoA, and we're likely to continue in that vein. Now, some of the less visible points very quickly are broadening the education offering to support the strategy that Chieh outlined earlier. So we had a very successful launch of our data science certificate, and if I can just put a wee advert in, it's open for the January sitting. Previous delegates have had a fantastic experience doing the previous cohorts. So treat yourself with an early Christmas present and get on the January cohort for the data science certificate. I think that will be a valuable experience for everyone. And in the pipeline, we're also working on additional learning offerings that would be for people working in banking, and climate risk is another kind of big theme to broaden the education offering to make reality the vision that Chieh outlined earlier.
Thank you, John. I'm just going to send a little reminder to everybody. We are starting to get a few of your questions coming through now, so thank you very much for that. But please do, if you've got questions, go into the Q&A function and send those through to us. Stephen, I'm going to turn to you next. And I'm going to start with a topic that we've had so many questions about that I couldn't really ignore it. And that is the question of our events. And there are lots and lots of questions. So I'm going to just kind of ask you a handful to begin with, and hope that you can give us a sense of what's going on. So we've been asked, how successful have the Gyro and the live conferences been where we've converted them online this autumn? Do you think that we're going to carry on doing lots more virtual events after the pandemic period, or will we return to mainly doing events in person? And probably the most important question, do you think it's appropriate that we are charging members for all or most webinars?
Thank you, Annette, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to answer the question directly. At the beginning of the year, we had quite a different view on events. We had a very carefully thought through events program for 2020, 2021, which was a lovely mix of face-to-face events and webinars where some would be provided free, some would be charged, and overall IFoA has never sought to profit from the events program, but they would overall seek to wash its own face in terms of covering costs. But in practice, some of the bigger face-to-face events were quietly subsidising some of the other events. Of course, the impact of COVID on IFoA and many other organisations has blown a hole in that model, because it's been impossible to run any face-to-face events. So we were faced with probably two practical questions back in March. One is we needed to scramble and put a number of events online. I'm delighted with the feedback that we've got from the Life and Gyro conferences. They've been extremely positive, and a huge thank you to all of those involved in making that happen. The other practical question was that we needed to recognise that we needed to subsidise all events for the foreseeable future until the world returned to something that might approach normal. And just to give a little bit more information on that, that we're appropriate, we have decided to recover through charging our direct costs. So that would simply be the cost of providing the event, the platform, the moderator, and so on. But the rest that we would seek to subsidise. And to give you and all of those on this call a sort of sense of the scale, since March we've had about 22,000 bookings. Over half of those have been for events that were provided for free. The others have had a small flat charge to simply cover those direct costs. And I think what that shows is that there is a demand for sort of high quality, tailored content that people are reasonably content to part with some money for. We do recognise that this is a temporary solution. The cost of the subsidy, because it does mean that all events are either fully subsidised or substantially subsidised to IFoA this year, is about 1.2 million. So I know there are other questions about the financial implications of COVID, but we do need to put that into the mix as well. I think we're very happy to do that, because in a world where more work and more events need to be provided, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. We will be taking a step back and looking at this more strategically next year. The feedback from Gyro in particular indicated from a very significant majority that people would be looking to have more of a blended or more fully online event in the future. And we need to take a step back to think about, well, what platform do we use to support that? What level of overhead does IFoA have? What level of numbers do we expect to reach? One of the fantastic things we've seen this year is a huge increase in the number of people booking conferences and events, and in particular a much more extensive global reach. So we want to put all of those into the mix, and that we will look at it more strategically next year when we have more information.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to keep you on the spot for a moment, just because we're now getting kind of live questions coming in response to what you're all saying, which is really great. Please do keep that coming to the people who are out there listening to us. So one question, which is kind of linked to what you and John have both been talking about, is whether the fact that we're doing more of our activities, whether it's exams or events online, are members likely to see a reduction in their fees as a consequence of that?
Not in the short term. I think we have to balance a lot of different considerations. If I look at the fee movement over the last 10 years, I think the Fellows has gone up £15 or so. So we have done our best to try and hold increases at beneath inflation rates. But we are having to balance many different things over the foreseeable future, and enabling us to make some of the investments that we've described earlier. I would say, however, in recognition that we do need to be able to demonstrate more value for money for our members, and we are working very hard with Council to make sure that we have a clear proposition for our members where they feel that they get extreme and excellent value for money for their contributions.
Great, thank you, Stephen. At least that's nice and clear for our members to understand what the position is. John, a quick follow-up, if I may, for you, which I hope you might know the answer to. One of our attendees has asked whether the CIRA qualification is also going to be done online now as a result of the kind of change in how we're doing our qualifications. Are you able to answer that?
I'm afraid, Annette, I don't know the latest on the CIRA qualification.
Oh, Louise is volunteering to help out, maybe, John. Louise, do you know?
I believe, yes, I believe plans are on track to get online CIRA workshops sometime in the new year, but you'd have to check with the lifelong learning team for the details on that.
Oh, and my helpful team are also sending me notes. So they're saying that actually, yes, it does look as though it's going to move online, and that dates are being set up for 2021 and will be released very soon. So I think between us, hopefully we've managed to give that member an answer on the CIRA question. Right, I'm going to come back to the President now, I think, Suee Chieh, and thank you all of the panelists for a good kind of first round of questions. Suee Chieh, I want to turn our attention to CPD. I know this is something that is, very important for a lot of our members. So the question is about your thoughts on the new CPD scheme. So obviously that's been running now for about 3 months, went live in September. And in particular, we've been asked, how can fellows ensure that they make a success of the new scheme? And also, what reaction or feedback have we had from members to the changes to the scheme? You're still on mute, which has made me feel better, so thank you.
Sorry, I was trying, because there's thunderstorm in Singapore, so I didn't want it to affect the sound. There's one word which characterizes the new CPD scheme, which is actually mirrored in a philosophy of VSMD, and also a program which we are rolling out called Moonshot. Yeah? And it's about ownership of our own learning. Ownership of our own learning. My own experience of CPD was that you have to give evidence that you attended seminars and so forth. Whether you have actually learned anything is open to doubt. But the new CPD scheme invites you to do reflection and also to ask yourself, what have you learned? And there is a peer process. Yeah, I have less feedback about it, but I recall I was involved with actuaries, members, some senior, some less senior, who felt that the previous system, they're not necessarily learning anything by attending those events. So I think this scheme will meet their needs. Yeah. And now I go to the VSMD proper, because it is not just about CDB, it's about whole attitude of the profession and also of IFoA to learning, right? Because learning is not about the checklist, yeah. Learning is about learning, right? It's not about qualification necessary and passing exams, although they are still important yardsticks. It's about really inculcating an attitude of embracing learning as a mindset, even though you are not taking exams, yeah. Because that is really necessary in a world of increasing longevity, and in a world where knowledge updates themselves almost on an annual basis, or even sometimes more frequently, and sources of uncertainties come rushing at us. So I think, I want to speak to that space, CPD professionalism, what it means, rather than to say that this is a checklist and therefore you've got to do certain things. So that was a whole philosophy. I believe that the feedback, I didn't get too much feedback, it was quite mixed. Yeah, there are many people who actually welcome it. There were some who who are more concerned because they want something more structured. Yeah, and I think that you are probably unable to please everybody. You want more structure so that they can demonstrate they have done it. So I think we are in that space, and I wondered if whether Stephen or anybody else would want to add color to that. Yeah, to the CPD process, which we have introduced a few months ago. Yeah.
That sounds like an invitation if you want to take it, Stephen.
Just reflecting on the world that we live in, I think the introduction of reflective learning is really important. One of the reflections I've had this year is that if we were doing this this event this time last year, we wouldn't be talking about COVID-19, BLM or climate to the extent to which we will be today. And I think sometimes all of us are so busy in our tunnel of finishing things off, the importance of just taking a step back to reflect on what we really learned is really important. And I think that is a huge change for IFoA, and hopefully our members will see the benefit of that change to CPD coming through over the next year or so.
A quick follow-up question, which I think perhaps either of you might be able to answer, still on the subject of CPD. We have had a question that asks whether we're going to be perhaps being a little bit more lenient, that is the word the member used, around the CPD requirements, partly because of the change in the scheme and also because of the disruption because of COVID. So I don't know if either of you could say something about how we're going to approach that aspect.
I'm not sure lenient is the right word. Yeah, I think I'm not sure lenient is right. I think we because I think it's important to send the message out that it's not about compromising standards. Yeah, because it's actually to make sure that we learn the best possible way. There are many arguments against the old system of attending seminars or reading books. You know, because it doesn't mean that if someone turns up, he actually learns, right? So in that sense. It looks more lenient, but actually here, the responsibility and ownership is passed to the learner, and it is for our own benefit. It's not really to please an authority called IFoA. And I think that is something we need to embrace as individuals, right, as we go forward. Yeah, of course, we still need to protect our reputation and standards and discipline and so forth. But a lot of it is really up to us as individual members. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to switch topic again, and I'm going to keep encouraging our delegates. I am getting some really great questions coming through, but please do keep those coming. But Louise, I wondered if I could turn to you again. And Stephen just mentioned it in passing, the fact that sustainability and climate change has, I think, was always important to some of our members, but has become a much more central topic for all of us. And so I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about kind of what is going on in that area for the IFoA, what kinds of initiatives are underway. I've had a very specific question that says they've heard there's going to be a curated reading guide on climate risk. So I wonder if you could say something about that. So really just kind of give us a bit of a summary around what's going on in the climate and sustainability world.
Right, well, that's quite difficult because there's quite a lot going on. Probably the best place to start is that in September, Council approved a report from a task force which basically produced a lot of recommendations on the IFoA's overall approach to climate-related risk. And one of the things in that is that all actuaries should consider climate-related risk as one of the major risks to think about, in the same way as we think about mortality and interest risks as major risks. But in order to enable that, we obviously have to support our members in learning about climate-related risk and thinking about how to approach it. So the Sustainability Board has done fantastic work on producing a whole range of resources. There's a especially good series of practical guides for actuaries on climate risk. You can find them on the website. The easiest way to find them is to search for practical guides in the search bar. That's the way I always get to them when I need them. They are also, as somebody mentioned, producing a curated reading list, which will essentially be a signposting to a range of resources describing what's in them so you can tell which ones are relevant for you. And that is under development from the Sustainability Board. Meanwhile, we are looking at producing a credential in the area of sustainability, which will be outside the qualification framework. So it will be available to all our qualified members as well as students. There's also some very good interesting member-led research work going on. So for example, we've just set up a working party to look at zoonotic disease risk. In other words, how does diversity loss increase contact points between people and wildlife, which enable the spread transfer of pathogens into us? So that's obviously tying in with some of the ICAT work we're doing. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on. And finally, as the cherry on the cake, as it were, we are just finalising a major policy statement from the IFoA on its position on sustainability, which will include a statement on organisational net zero carbon emissions. So what are we as an organisation going to do about it? And we can expect to see that issued, I'm very hopeful, before Christmas. So as I say, a lot going on. Watch this space.
Thanks, Louise. You seem to be our expert on giving us these very good potted summaries on areas where there are vast amounts of activity going on. So that's an excellent summary. And I know everyone who watches the news will recognise that it's an area where there's going to be more and more activity over the next year with COP26 coming up and so on. And because it's such an important issue with a kind of time limit on it, I suppose, in a way. So thank you for that. So we've had a question in which touches on quite a few different areas. I'm going to share the question and then maybe suggest that perhaps Chieh kicks us off. But it may be that a number of you want to chip in on this one. So the question is referencing the fact that there are going to be changes to the IFoA's governance structure. So I might in a moment ask you, Chieh, to just say a little bit about that so that members are a little more aware about what's going on with that. And what it's asking is, in the context of that, are we likely to change our approach to our regulation, particularly of practicing certificate members? So in other words, is the move to, I suppose, more flexibility going to extend into how we regulate, particularly practicing certificate holders? So there's a bit of regulation in there and a bit of governance. Chieh, are you happy to pick that up initially?
Yes, I am. Yeah, and I'll pick up the second part first in terms of regulation of UK Actuaries. Is essentially done by the Financial Reporting Council, and Financial Reporting Council is going to be succeeded by the Auditing and Governance Regulatory Authority. Yeah, and that is part of the Kingman's report. And a discussion in the last 2 or 3 months confirms that the actuarial profession will be regulated by AGRA. Yeah, so that is beyond doubt. And we have, as a body, we have been engaging FRC/AGRA that we would like to be more strategic in the discussion and to make sure that we help them to regulate us, because there's no such thing as self-regulation, in my opinion. We are going to be regulated by the authority. And the regulation is done through our regulation board, which is independent of council's influence. Yeah, independent of council. It's chaired by Neil Buckley and with a substantial number of independent directors. And they take their instructions or agreements from FRC, and their job is to regulate on their behalf, the actuaries of IFoA. But in our engagement process, we could persuade and influence the new AGRA that their scope is very large, and we should restrict the regulation to the most critical actuarial matters. Yeah, and that has not happened. That has not happened yet. Yeah, that's not happened yet. But that's our hope. The current practicing certificates, I don't think we are free to go and amend them, because it's obviously from FRC, so you had to work through the transition. But an opening has been created, and we have set up a strategic regulatory group led by a senior council member to engage FRC on behalf, and FRC or the AGRA on behalf to make sure that our regulations are proportionate. There are many jobs in the UK in particular involving Solvency II pricing, especially in life and pension, scheme actuary, RBC2 certificates, which require rigorous regulation and practicing certificates. But there are also many other jobs where a lighter touch may be useful, because they've got feedback from non-executive director, independent directors who are actuaries who are concerned that the language is not clear. So our hope is to make the language clear, but it's not something which Stephen, myself, or John could decide. It's something we have to reach agreement with the regulatory authority. So members sometimes feel that IFoA have been regulating them, but actually we are only a medium. And I think over the last 10-15 years, we probably have done that, and that's the right thing to do. But maybe there's an opening created because for us to go into newer waters at our fields diverge. So that is on the regulation part with respect to Kingman and FRC. And one thing which we did in the last 12 months was that we want to be more proactive, and that comes under the whole thought leadership and influencing thing. And that is not to say that in the past you were not proactive, but really it's more a shift, because given there are so many things which requires engagement, and that is the current mindset. On governance, I think a lot of good work has been done, because a lot of work has been done and achieved by establishing agile groups, the Moonshot group, the ICAT group, and different project groups over the last 8 or 10 months, partly because, and also the examinations group, to put the exams online, because our processes although our processes were very good and governance were very good, but when it comes to quick decision making, they are not so suitable. So we have led a review of that, led by Graham and Louis, and I think there will be a lightening of governance certainly by the corporate board. So I think it's good to metamorphosize into something which is more flexible, on 3 or 4 of the corporate boards. But on the practice boards, it's more about a change in mindset, about ownership and working with the executives, and that will take a few months or years to unwind. I think that's all I could say at this moment, but it's also about what we do on a day-to-day in terms of attitude and decision making. There are good reasons for us to do what we do. We are cautious and we want to make sure that things are right, but it's more about some awareness into the whole process, that we could do things a bit more quicker, and maybe, although sometimes it's good to be to decide rather than to wait for a perfect answer. So it's more of a mindset. That's all I would say at this point about governance.
That's great. Thank you, Suee. I think that's covered both those points. I think, John, you were saying that you might have something you wanted to add on this question.
Yeah, I just volunteered at the beginning of Suee's answer that ended up being very comprehensive, but just very, very quickly, I would say there's certainly a mindset at the IFoA leadership team, I think, to move away from prescribed rules in general towards principles, and we've talked about that in the CPD scheme. And as volunteers, I think we sometimes feel encumbered by detailed rules that we need to follow in governance. So that the mindset is very much about moving away from those detailed rules to allow people more freedom to take ownership, was a great word that Suee used earlier, and deliver their full potential. When it comes specifically to practicing certificates, I mean, the IFoA is the regulating body, full stop, but we do need to carry, FRC and its successor body, PRA and TPR, with us. I mean, the history of, going back a decade or two, when actuaries probably did let themselves down a little bit in terms of the regulation of equitable life, has taken a long time for us to rebuild trust. And if you look at the way financial institutions have been so resilient in the face of, COVID and financial market shocks, I think has gone some significant way restoring trust. So maybe we've got a bit more latitude now to persuade those stakeholders that, you know, maybe a more principle-based approach to practice certificate authorization is appropriate, but it's a journey, Annette, and not something we can do unilaterally overnight. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'm sure that's particularly helpful for the practicing certificate holders who are listening in. I mean, these kinds of changes take time, but what I think you're saying is we're on the kind of right sort of road, if you like. We're moving in the right direction. I'm just going to flip us back briefly because naturally enough there are some follow-up questions from people on the subject of the exams remaining online. And Stephen, I think this might be one for you, where we've had a couple of people asking, I think they might be student members, saying, well, look, if the exams are going to stay online, then can we expect to see a reduction either in student membership costs or indeed in the exam fees? Are you able to address that, please?
Yes, thank you, and they're really good questions to ask. Just to share some more information, actually this year our costs of running exams have had to reflect the fact that we've had to incur the cost for the exam centres that we'd already booked for this year that we've not been able to use, and to reflect the investment in the new platform for online exams. So actually this year we've had two sets of costs when it's come to running exams. Looking ahead at next year, we would never seek to profit from exams. I would obviously give our student members that reassurance. What we do need to do though is to invest in that exam platform to enable us to conduct exams online. And sadly, the costs that we will be saving from sort of exam centre models are being required to be spent on that new platform and in modernising the way that we deliver the exams. So it's largely netting itself out. I am acutely sympathetic though to the question, and one of the things that we do need to turn to over the next 12 months or so is the cost to qualify, and just making certain that when we have conversations with students we have a good answer on that one. And that's something that I will take away and reflect on, and make sure that when we have this event next year we have a good answer on that area.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Again, I think it's useful for the student members to at least have clarity about that. So that's really helpful. I'm going to see if we can fit a couple more questions in that are a little bit more future focused. And I'm just trying to kind of find, make sure I'm scrolling up and down these questions and getting the right questions for you. So we had a couple of questions that I think are sort of related. So one of the questions is, does the panel, and I might come to a couple of you on this, does the panel think that we're doing enough to encourage new people into the profession? This probably follows on quite nicely from talking about exams and student fees. And then a sort of related question that says, if we're kind of transforming the profession and changing and thinking about wider skills and wider values, then are we also working with employers of actuaries to see if they will be seeking those qualities, because this won't work if the recruitment opportunities aren't there? So I think they're kind of related. You know, how are we drawing people into the profession, and what are we doing about making sure that the right opportunities exist? Suee, Chieh, I wondered maybe if you wanted to kick off, and then I'll happily open it up for any of the other panelists who want to add anything in on that.
Yes, thanks, Annette. On new members, I think the pipeline of members look in line with the past. There's no big uptake, yeah. There's no big uptake, but there's no decline either, yeah. So it's quite consistent. But you see, for me, it is about how we position the profession to the young of today, especially those who have mathematical skills, yeah, who are learning actuarial science in Asia, in Africa, and UK. And we hear about competition from data science or from other professions, as well as possibly other professional bodies, which is probably a lesser issue. So I feel that the way we are positioned in terms of BSMD, in terms of skill sets and mindsets, will speak to that, because we are saying that we are embracing the new technologies, because BSMD was inspired by our response to data science. and digital revolution. And that would make sure that they could apply their skills in a meaningful way to a learning journey over the next 30 to 50 years. So I think that is good. But but in the early stage of the process, I was and we were challenged by a member of the Market Development Board. This is all good and well, but the young is not just you are transforming to thrive, but what are you doing to make a difference? Because the young care about the pain they see in the world. They care about the sustainability in the world. Although the social issues and the sustainability issues were in the original document, but it came very much more into the foreground in terms of using our skills to articulate our voice towards those issues. Yeah, and that was long before COVID-19 came into being, and long before even it was sort of mid-2019. Yeah, so that was written into the documents. But now with the advent of COVID-19, with all the climate crisis and the sense of uncertainty and the economic insecurity which seems to pervade, and also even things unmasked by our own project, Great Risk Transfer, with John Taylor champion, which points to maybe some issues about us transferring too much risk to customers. It actually begs the question on what this profession is for, right? What the profession is for. So the profession is for people who want to have rewarding careers with a background in mathematics. But then we have a public interest angle, which I think speak to that space wonderfully. So in that sense, I think that would be very powerful, right? On the employers part, Stephen, with his own initiative and energy, went out to engage 60, 70 employers across the world, and he would have feedback about the need, because I heard from him about the new mindset about thinking more innovatively and more enterprise-wide in order to be effective actuaries. But the issues on climate science and pandemics is also blurring up, right? If you talk to all the big consultancies and all, these are big issues of our time. Whether we like it or not, we'll be drawn into it because of our adjacency. Because everything that happened in climate science or climate change or pandemics is going to impact whatever we are doing, all the things we have been doing in the past on investments, on mortality tables, longevity tables. We are so adjacent to all the big issues of our time. So instead of just being drawn into it, I see that we could reposition, which I think we are repositioning to make sure that employers know that our actuaries are good in doing the technical work, but also good in thinking on much bigger issues and range of issues in the area of innovation in digital, as well as in an area where we need a new form of reflection, yeah, because they were to do with sustainability challenges of our time. But we are early days yet, and that because I keep on looking back to the last 30 years and look at my home country, Malaysia, and where I keep on expressing amazement that we have 160 qualified actuaries, right? But small changes today will lead to big changes in 10 years' time. So I just sense that we are on a right path or journey, yeah.
Thank you, Suee. It seems as though all of these things are quite connected. Louise, I wondered if you wanted to add anything on this. I know it's a subject that's very important to you.
Yes, I think it is, because I think one of the things we really need to do is to be thinking about diversity here. So obviously diversity about the types of people we get in. Some, you know, we don't want to be just narrow specialist mathematical thinkers. There's always space for people like that, but we need more general people as well. But also, especially in the UK, this part of my answer is going to be very UK focused, we need to think about diversity on all sorts of dimensions, gender, ethnicity, and so on. And we are working hard on that. We've had a diversity strategy in place for the last 5 years or so. We're just looking at that and seeing how we can strengthen that and do more work on this. And I very much hope that we will be working with employers to think about how we can encourage more people from different backgrounds to come into the profession. And this is something that I think we can use to build, to reinforce our relationships with employers. I think it can be a very positive initiative that we do on that.
Thanks, Louise. I think that the combination of both of those two answers, you know, I think this is an important part of the IFoA's role for members. So it's interesting to hear how much we're doing in those areas. I think I've probably got time for just a couple more questions. There's one that's come in that I think is quite interesting, and I am going to come back to Suee, I think, on this one. So some of the people who are with us this morning have also been paying lots of attention to the new materials that we've published on the reinventing the profession theme and strategic work that we're doing, and they've been watching your videos, Chieh, on our website, which I think is great. So we've got a question that wonders whether you could expand on the importance of thought leadership and uncertainty for the actuarial profession. Could you say a few words on that, please? I think you might still be on mute.
That was a helpful few seconds. I need to get my head around it. Thought leadership and uncertainty. Perhaps I would start with uncertainty first. We have been dealing with uncertainty for the last 300 to 400 years. The IFoA has was established 160 years ago, but before that we have people who like John Grant, Edmund Halley, who were sort of the first actuaries, and they inherited from Pascal and Fermat, which were pondering the world of uncertainty, and that was about chance and probability. And then of course we imported into life tables about uncertainty of the span of life, and trying to bring some curves into it. So we have always been dealing with uncertainty, but of course our skills improved, and we capture them through probability distribution, expectations, variances, life tables, and we are able to apply them in our work. And data science, which the last 3 presidents and me pushed very hard for, was an extension of that, because those uncertainty were based on a print-based society, whereas data science is based on a digital society where data is in abundance and there's great computational power and there's great veracity and velocity of data. That argument has been very widely established by council. So, but there is a new form of uncertainty, is that our risk models, because we call ourselves risk professionals. If you call ourselves actuaries, one could argue that could you still remain technical, although Reddington will have an argument about that, because he will say an actuary who's only an actuary is not an actuary. But we call ourselves risk professionals. And risk professionals, we cannot certify something is sound or sustainable just because our risk models say so. And I think that goes back to the last 15, 20 years. We have gone back to where the last 15, 20 years, we are going to be more technical, which is still very important, because that is the basis of what we are employed for. So I'm not, for one moment, am I criticizing those roles? Those roles are reserved roles on pricing, valuation, and so on, which are very important. And we continue to engage whoever wants to engage on PRA or Bank England in any kind of consultation. But there is another bucket of uncertainty which is emerging, which by open admission by very senior thinkers like Mervyn King, who's a former Bank of England governor, by John Chieh, Financial Times columnist, and even Mark Carney, who says that our risk models are not doing their work. And our risk models are based on very fixed probability distribution, Gaussian distribution, but the world has shifted to uncertainty, which is can't capture it. And I have met actuaries in some of the consultings which are thinking in those terms, that it's not about risk models, but about narratives, about sources of uncertainty, about big world thinking, because most of our models are in small world thinking. So in that world, I believe that actuaries, actually, that was part of our heritage, of our tradition. Maybe for the last 10 or 15 years, we have gone too close to the mathematics. And in fact, Reddington has a very good quote for this. He said that our greatest capability is when we don't stay too close to our mathematics, but get involved with the bustle of humanity. And that was in his presidential address. The other quote on actuary, who is only an actuary, it's not an actuary, is in his gold medal acceptance address. So in the presidential address, which is much longer, he talks about our need not to get sucked into the mathematics, although that is our core, and we shouldn't drift away from that. So that is the basis of the issue of uncertainty. And then if you turn it around about thought leadership, I think as a body which is committed to public interest, because it is in our charter, we cannot say that we are happy just because we are doing our work well in our workplace. What is our public interest, right? And that public interest has to be expressed in the areas which impact us in our industry, which is largely financial services industry, or the society we live in. And most of the issues which impact us is actually issues of sustainability, climate science, pandemics, economic security, income security. If you say income inequality, it sounds political, right? But if you say income security, and retirement security, that's what pension funds are for. That's what insurance products are for. Our insurance products and pension funds products providing retirement security, income security, and economic security? Are our financial systems serving the people in the UK and the people in the world well? Those are big questions. And I will always add, as a profession, we are too small to effect change. But we can contribute to the conversation. And in many ways, if we think differently about ourselves and remind where our past came from, where we came from, our past, it will be manifest in our behaviors and the work we do. So this is really a good.
I think you're taking us into questions that are far too big for this session, but I think that's been a really good exposition to answer the question. I'm going to steal a line from John and have a quick advertisement, which is for those of you who haven't gone on our website and seen the new materials that have been posted up this week all around the Reinventing the Profession. There's a lot of more detail about all the kinds of things that Chieh has just been describing, and indeed some excellent videos. So please do go and have a look at those if you haven't done. Panelists, lady and gentlemen, I have about 3 minutes left in which I think I can ask you a quick fire question. This is a question that was sent in by one of our members in the context of COVID-19. And so what I'd like to do is get you each to give me 30 seconds on this. And the question is, in this year which has been so unusual and different, and the word I think is unprecedented, what is the single biggest thing that you have learned from this year? So Stephen, I think I'm going to come to you first and then I'll come around the panel.
I'll take less than 30 seconds. I think it was that Donald Rumsfeld was right.
I'm going to hope that all of our delegates know what you mean by that reference, but there is always Google available if not.
Indeed.
Great answer. So John, can I come to you next, please?
Thanks, Annette. I'm going to be less succinct and maybe even chuck in two things in my 30 seconds. So first of all, not a learning, just a reinforcement about how important and vital the work is that the profession does. All the work that we've done with insurance funds and pension funds over the years have meant that they've been so resilient to these unprecedented shocks this year, which in turn gives confidence to the consumers and savers that rely on them so much. And that's something individual actuaries in the profession can be hugely proud of. And the lesson would come back to what I was saying about online exams, the ability to change and do things more radically and quickly. I think we've surpassed all our expectations, and if we can just retain that power and radical approach as we move beyond the pandemic, I think our chances of achieving the visions are excellent.
Thank you. Louise?
Whenever anyone says, but that could never happen, don't believe them. What happens if this pandemic is just a near miss for one that is either has much higher fatality rates or much higher contagion rates?
I think that's definitely something for us all to think about. Finally, Chieh, you can have the last word on this.
I think two words are reflexive and context. Context in the sense that the context has changed. Yeah. The world has changed in a dramatic way. We need to respond to that. Reflexive is about responding to it with flexibility.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you very much. That's been an hour that has certainly for me has passed quite rapidly. I would like to thank the dozens and dozens, we were well up into the hundreds of attendees on this session, and particularly those of you that sent through questions either during the session or in advance. I can't really run this session without your questions. And on your behalf, I would also like to thank the panelists for covering so many different topics and giving us such candid answers, I think, and also a lot of things that are food for thought. So thank you to the panel, and thank you to our members for choosing to join us this morning. That's the end of the session.